Now, guys, let's start with our respective today's session and let's talk about, right, before jumping into this AWS security specialty C03, let's talk about different kind of certifications, guys, we have into the AWS, right? Okay. And first of all, I hope everyone is aware about AWS is part of Amazon. Okay. And in this AWS, we have currently multiple certifications. So let's see that particular hierarchy of the certifications that we have and where does the AWS security specialty really stand, right? And is the AWS security specialty, is it a beginner certificate? Should you go directly for it? So let's see that. Okay, perfect. Okay, this, guys, is the official page of the AWS certifications, right? And what the AWS has done is that to make it easier for you to understand how the AWS has arranged these respective certifications, they have divided the certification structure into four levels, the hierarchy into four levels. First level is the foundation level, right? Foundation level is a beginner level, and in that you have currently two certificate, cloud practitioner and AI practitioner up in place. Okay, so if you want to start with the AI part in the AWS, that how do you can create or deploy the AI models or train them up into the AWS, you can go with the AI practitioner up in place, right? And if you are very new to the cloud or especially to the AWS, this is certification you can go for cloud practitioner foundation up. Okay, perfect. So, but generally, I don't recommend to my respective student that to go with cloud practitioner, even if you are a beginner, right? You have never have any sort of an exposure with it when it comes to the cloud. I never recommend it to my respective student to go with the cloud practitioner because in the cloud practitioner, guys, the thing is that it's very basic. Okay, right? And very basic terminology and foundation you will be getting it up. So if you're thinking about building up a serious career into the cloud domain, this is not going to be helpful for you in any way. Okay, it will not be helpful for you in cracking in any exam or passing an interview or getting a respective job, right? Okay, it's just give you an overview of the AWS and that's it. It does not tell anything about that. Do you have any set of a skill set or do you understand the cloud environment, right? So it does not make you ready for any specific job role as well. Okay, so I would not recommend that for. All right, if your company is paying it up, right, they are paying for the respective voucher, then you can opt for it. That's the thing. But if you're paying from your own pocket, it doesn't make sense at all to go for it, right? It will not be worth it. Otherwise, so what should be you do? Which certificate you should go for if you're planning it up to start learning in the AWS and seriously build up a career into it? So we go to the second level, which is the associate level. The first level was the foundation level where two certifications are there, right? The second comes the associate level. Now, associate level right now contains of, you can see that, five certification. Cloud Ops Engineer, previously this was called SysOps Engineer, Developer Associate, Data Engineer, Solution Architect, and Machine Learning up in place, right? And I would recommend to anyone who is starting up into the AWS or who just wants to understand it from the scratch and little by little he wants to build up a foundation very clearly, I would request him to go with this certification, which is called Solution Architect Associate. This certification makes you ready or build your very solid foundation for for architect, right, into the cloud domain up in place. Okay, so whenever it comes the respective requirement for an organization to create up an architecture in the cloud in the AWS, this is certification that can really helpful for you, like the methodology, the tools, how to use it, the services, right? Okay, what are the benefits of which service, what are the consequences, right? You should be aware about that. Every service has its own pro and cons. So you should be aware about where to use which particular service. That's the thing. So I would request you to go for this respective certification of Solution Architect Associate. It is definitely the difficulty level lies between basic to intermediate, right? So it's not very advanced. It's absolutely beginner friendly up in place, right? Associate one. So here you start from scratch, like creating up the instance, and little by little, you just learn about how do you actually deploy up an architecture into the AWS. Okay, and this is about machine learning. a very basic building block. It will be helping you to create up a machine learning thing into the AWS. This is about data engineer up in place, that if you want to learn about data lifecycle, right, encrypting up the data, segregating the data, that's what it is. You can learn it up here. Okay, and this is for the developer. So here, this respective certification, I would say, it's a combination of AWS concept and your coding concept up in place, because here you are definitely for sure going to create things using up the codes and deploying it up into the AWS up in place. Okay, so if you have a prior experience with the coding, that will be really really helpful for you. Okay, great. And then you have this thing which is called Cloud Ops Engineer up in place. So here you talks about the management, the operation of the respective resources into the AWS, how well they are performing up, right? It's cloud operations. So if you have deployed up a respective server, which technically in the AWS guys we call it the instance. It's just a fancy name they have given it up. It's exactly a server. So when you deploy a server into the AWS, is the servers perfectly working fine? Is there any failure in that particular server at 2 o'clock in the night, right? And if it is, so can you perform any kind of an automation that automatically rectify that particular mistakes? And if let's suppose someone's tried to perform a brute force attack over your respective server, fine, where does the logs get created? Where does the logs get stored, so that you can investigate further? So these kind of things in much more depth you learn it up into the cloud ops engineer. Okay, that's the thing. Right. So I would recommend to you that if anyone is looking for which where to start from, this is a really good option, I would say. Okay, great. Solution architect associate, right? And why I'm saying is one option is that it will be preparing you for the architect job in the organization. Okay, one thing, helping you building a very solid foundation into the AWS for the upcoming higher certificate. And there is another very very famous certificate, and which is very much in demand, which I'm going to show it to you, which is called Solution Architect Professional, which is very advanced certificate. So if you want to go with that certificate, this is the one where you should start for. Okay, then you have the third layer, which is the professional layer. Now here it says AWS says that you should have at least 2 years of an experience, right? Even to start preparing for this respective certification. Now, this is not a compulsory thing. This is just a suggestion from the AWS side that man, that if you have 2 plus 15 years of an experience, it will be really good. And I would say that yes, your experience, if you have some sort of an experience with the AWS, and then you go with these certifications, right? The professional one, there are three right now: DevOps, Solution Architect Professional, and Generative AI Professional. They are not easy. Okay, they are tough nut to crack, and here by itself you have to have a lot of concept already cleared. Okay, because here let's suppose when I teach these professional certification, I don't talk about how to create a server, because you should be already well established and your basics should be razor sharp when we talk about these respective concept. Okay, because here we go in much more depth, right? That's the thing. So here we are talking about DevOps up in place into the AWS, how to create that CI/CD pipeline. So that particular thing, the CI/CD pipeline we have in place, how do you create that CI/CD pipeline into the AWS? That's what we learned up here in this case. Okay, correct. And the solution architect professional. The previously that I showed to you, that was associate. It was very beginner friendly, but the professional one is not. It is, I would say, it's a very tough certificate up in place. So you should have a lot of concept already cleared before even start preparing for this respective examination, right? Okay, because here they are not going to talk about that tell us uh, the how to create up a server or those kind of things. They are going to go a lot deep. Here you talk about migration of the data, redundancy, right? At a much larger scale. Okay, that's the thing. So it really tests you when you sit for this respective exam. It really tests your ability to create an architecture which is resilient, right? Where you can easily migrate the data. If there is any failure, how you are able to handle that respective failure. That's is being test up in your respective examination. Okay, perfect. And then, guys, we have the fifth, I would say, the level, which is the specialty level, right? And specialty level right now, you see that we have only three certifications: machine learning specialty, okay, Advanced networking specialty. Here we only talk about networking concepts into the AWS. Creating up the VPC, deploying up the respective resources inside it, how to troubleshoot those respective resources, any kind of a networking issue up in place. Fine, that kind of things. Okay. So if anyone is already working into the networking domain and he wants to level up his respective networking skills, this is certification you can go for. This is not a beginner certificate, so definitely for sure you should be knowing about a lot of things, right? Like you should be knowing about CIDR notation, okay, IPv4, IPv6, basic understanding you should be already having it up before applying and start studying for this respective certificate of advanced networks specialty, right? How do you actually, uh, you know, deals with the networking segment when it comes to the AWS in at an advanced level. Okay. And then we have this respective certificate which is called AWS Certified Security Specialty. This is a certificate which is talking about how you can protect your respective infrastructure. So whatever the infrastructure you have till now, right? That how are you going to protect it? Okay, using up encryption, hashing, right? Let's suppose, for example, someone is creating some resources up in place, so you have logs. Okay, so how are you going to keep your respective logs secure? Logs are, I would say, guys, it's a footprint. In normal circumstances, let's suppose you create something, you you perform an activity, logs gets created. Okay, so logs are your respective footprint. Any action you perform, whether deploying up an application is failing, application is running it up, right? That all logs will be created up in place. Okay, that's the thing. And if something goes wrong, you can go to these respective logs to look for that, whether anything, who was the culprit, what was the reason this thing failed up in place, was and any person was there behind it which tried to intentionally stop this respective server due to which this application failed. So you can see that all of it into the respective logs, right? Okay. So keeping the respective logs, storing the logs safely and securely, right? Encryption up in place. There is a wonderful service we have into the AWS which is called KMS. And KMS is an encryption service. So it helps you to create your respective key, and that respective key, then you can use it up to encrypt your data up in place. Okay, that kind of things. So that's what we learn up, guys, in this AWS security specialty, right? So that's what we have. So in the AWS security specialty, I would say that what's going to happen up is you learn about the AWS, but from the security perspective up in place, right? Data protection, incident response, forensics, those kind of things, right? Playbook, automation, right? Logging and monitoring, those kind of things we learn it up into the respective security specialty up in place. Okay, perfect. And I would say that this is not a beginner certification up in place. So if anyone is starting up, so definitely for sure he or she should be having up a lot of a basic idea about the AWS already. Okay, that kind of things. Normally, in my respective session, if a student joins up with the objective of learning of AWS security specialty, and that particular person does not has any kind of a prior background of the AWS, in that case, normally initially in initial days, I go through the basics of the AWS so that we all are at the same page. Okay, that kind of thing. So our basic initially in initial 2 or 3 days we have a basic understanding, and after that we go into hardcore security up in place. Okay, that kind of things. Perfect. So this is a very well-renowned certificate we have into the AWS. Okay, where you have different firewalls, how you are configuring those respective firewalls, protecting your respective resources, right? What is defense in depth concept is all about. Those different concepts of the security into the AWS, we learn about that. Perfect. Okay, and if I click into it, recently a new version has been increased up, deployed up. Fine, of the security specialty. So first of all, here you can see that the exam duration is 170 minutes, correct? And the format of the question is 65 question. And the type of question, guys, has recently changed up. Previously, it was only MCQ, but now they have changed it up in pace. Okay, I'm going to show it to you. So the number of questions is 65 questions. You will be getting it up, and the cost is this 600 300 US dollars. And the testing is whether you can it's proctored based online, or you can get it from you can go to your respective nearest JSON View Test Center up in place. Okay, and these are the languages where it is available up in place. Perfect. Okay, so now let's go and let's talk about the security specialty, guys, in much more detail. Okay, so I hope everyone is clear about the different kind of certification, guys, we have into the AWS, right? As per the changing in market and the demand, these certification are added and removed up as well. Okay, that kind of things happens up a lot. So today, let's suppose, for example, you're seeing certain certifications, and suddenly the AWS think that, you know what, there is not much demand into the market for this respective certificate, so they will automatically remove it by itself. Okay, that's the thing. Now, guys, let's talk about this respective certificate we have in place, AWS Security Specialty. So I told to you that how many questions it is there into the respective examination, how much time duration we are having it up, and in this respective security specialty, we are talking about how to protect the respective infrastructure up in place. Okay, using up the firewalls, using up different kind of protocols, right? That kind of things. So this is what we have in place, AWS Security Specialty, which is definitely not for a beginners, I would say that, right? Okay, great. Then let's talk about a comparison between C02 and C03. So here by itself, guys, this is a respective comparison, domain-wise comparison of your respective security specialty, C02 and C03. Now let's look into it. So here you can see that in the previous version, we were having infrastructure security. This was a concept we were having it up. See, the number of domains are almost the same. Okay, you can see that, right? 666. And here in the previous one, you have infrastructure security, which was 20%. Here also you have infrastructure security, but the weightage has been reduced up in place. You see that it is 18% up in place. Okay, that kind of things, right? Then we have this thing which is called by the name of a data protection. So how are you going to protect your respective data? That's very important, right? Okay, as we know, by today we say a thing that data is the new oil, correct? So you have to protect your respective data. So in the previous version it was 18%. Now it is still 18% up in place. So weightage of this data protection is not changed. So your encryption, right, that falls under the data protection up. Very important, very important, I would say that. Okay, the KMS we call it, right? How, what is actually the KMS, how to replicate your respective key, find how to upload your own respective key material, right? What is an envelope encryption is all about, key rotation. So all these different kind of things we have having it up, that's what we have into this respective thing, which is the data protection segment up in place. Okay, perfect. Now, after this respective data uh, protection, we have another important concept, which another domain I would say, which is called IAM, Identity and Access Management, which was previously also present, and in this respective new version, IAM is also present up as well. Previously it was 16%, now it has increased to 20%. So I would say not just only authorization, authentication, authorization, accounting, all falls under the respective IAM part. So in when it comes to the AWS part, guys, there is a very important thing that we do in the IAM, which is kind of creating the particular policy. And definitely for sure in your respective examination, you're going to get a question from it about the policy part. Either they will say to you that this is a particular policy, tell us what's wrong in this policy, right? Or it will tell us that this is a particular policy and how you can improve its respective security, right? Or this is a requirement, which of the policy suits the best. Okay, that kind of thing. So it's very important, I would say that. And when you will be implementing or using the AWS, guys, in your real life, correct, in your respective production environment, in your respective organization, or any kind of project, IAM is definitely the one you're going to work extensively upon. Okay, where you have to write the particular policy so that a user or a respective service would be able to access it. There is another very important concept we have into the IAM, which is called IAM role. And without IAM role, guys, keep in mind, two services in the AWS cannot communicate with each other. They are almost all the 200 services that we have into the AWS, all of them are in a complete isolation from each other. Okay, so if those respective services wants to communicate with each other, they need something which is called by the name of the IAM role, right? And you have to give it a permission as well. That's what we have in the IAM part. So you see that the weightage of the IAM has significantly increased from 16 to 20% in this respective version. So that it means is that when you sit for this new version C03 exam, you're going to get more questions from the IAM part, right? Because of it is increased definitely for sure. Okay, great. And it's very, very important from security point of view because one mistake you do and you provide unauthorized person the access of your respective resources, and that's not what we want, right? So yeah, that's what we have. Okay. And then we have thing which is called security logging and monitoring. Previously, this was a domain name, security logging and monitoring, which was 18%. Now they have what they did is that they have renamed it to something which is called by the name of an right this thing incident response up and pace. Okay, yeah. So this is what we have they have done it up. Fine. Okay. And in this respective one, we will be talking about this logging only, correct? That how you're logging it up, how you're monitoring it up. So they have just kind of, you can think about renamed it, and their weightage has decreased up in this respective part. Fine. This is what we have. So normally what will happen up in this respective part, it will talk about the respective logs, how you're going to, like the incident is passed, right? How you're going to collect the respective logs, how you're going to contain the respective incident so that it does not spread, its scope does not spread and does not affect the other resources up in place. Okay. Then there was threat detection and incident response. Now they have removed it to only detection up in place. Okay. Now, in the detection part, again, the logs will be coming up. And in the detection part, there is three services which are very important that comes into the picture, which is CloudTrail, CloudWatch, and the config, right? And you can see that its weightage has increased up in this case. So CloudTrail is a log API monitoring of service up in space, right? So any action that you do into the AWS, any action, read, write, modify, delete, anything, your AWS is going to manage it up in place. We were having CloudTrail, CloudWatch, and the config, right? So CloudTrail talks about the log part place, right? So any action that you're performing it up, right? Let's suppose you're creating up a server, deleting a server, that falls under the respective CloudTrail. But on the other hand, you have another service which is called CloudWatch, which is a resource monitoring, and config talks about changes that took place up in place, right? That's what we have. Okay, perfect, right? Then we have at the last, the last domain previously was management and security governance, right, which was 14%, which is talking about the governance part, right? Okay. And now they have changed it to security foundation and the governance one, right, which is the weightage has almost remained the same. Okay. So this is what we have in up and paste. So this is, I would say, this is the change from the domain wise and the percentage and the weightage wise from the context of the AWS up and paste. Okay. Okay, so this is a kind of a differential happening, please. Okay, and then we will be looking at the domain wise as well. So this is what we have, guys, in this respective part. The difference up in place. Okay. Now what I do is that, guys, I just take you to much more detail into it. So this is just an overview, domain wise overview, like what we have in each domain. Okay, fine. So in this respective part, what we have is an overview. Correct. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do in this respective part is that I'm going to show it to you, the respective document I'm having it. Just a minute. Which I have. And this respective document talks about the exam guide, what we have into the examination, and what actually changed from the AWS context. Okay. Because right now what you're seeing it up, this is no, it's an overview. But let's see that what is actually happening it up. So this is an official AWS exam documentation. I'm showing it up, exam guide. Okay. Here it is. So different. If you scroll it down, and in this respective case, different certifications you will be getting it up here, right? AWS Certified Develop Associate, okay. DevOps Cloud Ops Engineer up in place, okay. Certified Solution Architect Associate. So this is how, this is not something which I have found out somewhere. No, it's already present there into the AWS domain, right? In the AWS website, the certification I showing to you there. So you go there, and this is where you will be finding it out. It is kind of an exam guide for all the certifications we are having it up into the AWS up in place, right? Okay. So here by itself there is a specialty level, and the specialty, this is it. It's 235. So just a minute. Let me go to 235. Okay, wait a minute. It's just hold on. It's about machine learning. We're not looking for that right now. Okay, fine. Here it is. AWS Security Specialty SCS-C03. Correct? So let's see that what is actually happening in this respective one. Okay, perfect. And these are different, right? Okay. So in this respective case, here it says target candidate description. You should have equivalent of 3 or 5 years of an experience with the cloud solution up in place. So that is a recommendation from the AWS side that if you have a 3 5 years of an experience into the AWS, it's good, right? You will be easily able to grasp the respective concept. If not, then nothing to worry about it up in place, because I have many students which are not having 3 or 5 years of an experience. Hardly they have 1 year of an experience, or someone has 6 years of 6 months of an experience up in place. They're very new to the cloud. Okay, so this is a little bit more exaggerated, right? I don't recommend that you should have 3 years or 5 years of experience, then only you will be able to sit for the examination. No, even you are very beginner up as well. If you dedicate certain amount of time on a daily basis, definitely for sure within a month or two you will be able to ready for this respective examination. Okay, if you are a beginner, right? Okay, this is just a recommendation from the AWS side, not something a limitation. Okay, perfect. Now here is that this is a recommended knowledge. Again, it is a recommendation up in place in this respective place. Okay, perfect. So here it is, this respective thing, like you should be aware about vulnerability management. You should be aware about root cause analysis, right? Logging and monitoring strategy up in place. You should have worked with the firewall part. So they are recommending that if you have an idea about it up in place, then it will be good to go. Okay, fine. You will be easily able to grasp the respective concept, right? Okay, but again, this is just a recommendation we are having it. Okay, fine. So this is it. Now let's talk about. I was telling you about the examination part, the how the questions are going to come up in place. Okay, the questions I told you about is multiple choice, right? First of all, because previously the only multiple choice question used to come, but now they have changed it. You see that these are the following questions you will be getting it up in place: multiple choice, multiple response, ordering, and matching. Multiple choice is pretty straightforward up in place. Okay, yeah. So in this respective part, what we have is that we have something which is called the multiple choice, right? And what actually happens up in the respective multiple choice here is that you have, multiple choice options up in place. You select the one, right? The MCQ, the normal one we have in place. Okay. Multiple response means that there are 2 or 3 correct options would be there out of five. Let's suppose 5 options are there, two and three, 2 or 3. You have to select the out of the five, the correct one. Okay, so multiple responses, not just one, 2 or 3 correct options up in place. Okay, simple. So it's also kind of a variation of the MCQ only. But now from this respective one, they have added up ordering and matching up in place. So you have a list of 3 or 5 respondents. So let's suppose this is some kind of task had taken place, and now there is a proper order up in this respective part. Fine. Okay. So there is a thing has happened up. Now, in the ordering one, you have to arrange it in a proper order up in place. Okay, let's suppose your organization is facing up an SQL attack. I would not say, I mean, it will not be a bypassing a login up. It's an SQL injection. What you do is that you write a particular prompt to the SQL, right? And that SQL, I would consider is that not so smart enough to identify that the prompt or the query that has been given to it is how much valid or not, right? So in that respective case, what actually happens up is there, right? That SQL, you write up a respective query to the SQL stating up that SQL, please. Exactly. Not only fetch the data entering, right, but you can also destroy the data as well. So what you can do is that you can just write up a query to the SQL that SQL go ahead and delete all the data or override all the data in the respective database. SQL without a flinch would be going up and deleting everything into the respective database. Okay, that's the thing. Correct. That's what we have in this respective part. Fine. Perfect. So this is what we have in this respective case. Okay. So this is what we have, guys, in this respective part. Fine. Okay. So if your organization is facing up any kind of an SQL attack, so what you should do in an order, right? These are certain kind of an order. So you should be arranging it up in a structured manner so that your organization is able to handle this SQL injection properly. Okay, so there is some random sequence would be there. You have to arrange it properly up in place. So you should be aware about the SQL injection and all these kind of things up in place. So that's what an ordering talks about, right? Okay, and matching up, right? So you have to match up the power, match up the following like kind of things you will be seeing it up here. Okay, that's it. Perfect. Okay, right. So this is so these multiple choice question, multiple response, ordering, and matching is a thing. So there's a list of responses to match with a list of 3 or 7 prompts up in place, like which we have match of the following up in place, something like that. You will be getting it up. So yeah, this is going to be the case, right? In a couple of months, I would say that, right? In each initial month, this is the practice for the AWS. There's the ordering and the matching questions initially will be less, right, from the previous history. Okay, but as the days goes by, then they are going to increase this number, the ordering and the matching questions more into the examination. Fine. So this is guys what we have in this here. Okay, perfect. Now I scroll it down and a lot of things about the examination and all this kind of stuff. We all talked about it, all these things, domain wise. So I would say that, from the domain perspective, it's all the same, right? It's not changing anything at all. It's exactly the same up in place. Okay. Not much major different or significant changes have not taken place between your C02 and C03. Okay, they are almost the same, but with slight differences. And let's see that what those respective things are all about. Okay, perfect. So here by itself, let's see that what that respective things are. So here by itself, these are the respective domain, and you will see that they're almost the same, right? The VPC flow log that was present in the previous one, as well as it's present here as well. Very, very important from monitoring point of view. Okay. VPC flow log tells you that the traffic that is coming to the respective VPC and going out as well. That's what we have. There's a transit gateway flow logs. So this Route 53 resolvable logs up in place. Okay. That kind of things. Perfect. So they are all which we have in our previous session up in place. Infrastructure up in place. Okay. Perfect. With certain changes. And we're going to see that. Now I scroll it down. Correct. VPC endpoint. We were previously also having this VPC endpoint, VPC client VPN up in place, verified. Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service EKS. Okay, this fine. I scroll it down, and here by itself, just a minute, they have a section. These are the services that you should be aware about. You see that topics. Okay, computing services, developer services. Okay, these are services you should be aware about. Correct, different services up in place. But I'm not interested into it. I'm still interested into this respective difference. We'll be seeing it up here. Yes, the comparison. The comparison up in place, which just few minutes back I already explained to you the difference between SCS-C02 and SCS-C03 up in place. Like what is the difference we are having it up? Okay, the domain wise. But from the content point of view, these are things up in place. These are the things that are added up in this respective part. Fine. Okay. So here it is like validating, finding the security services, right? Scope up in place that is added up. Then we have something new added, which is very, very new, which is called by the name of OCSF, which stands for Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework Format. What this OCSF talks about is that, see, let's suppose, for example, you have logs with different formats. So let's suppose your firewalls are there, right? And your firewall, I would say that let's suppose, for example, would be having a different log format. Then your let's suppose you have VPC flow log, they will be having different format. So you have different logs. You have multiple logs into the AWS, and all of them had different format up in place. Correct? Okay. Now what's going to happen up is that you want to study all of them, or you want to merge all of them to read it to look for any incident up in place. It becomes very difficult for you. So what happens up with this open cybersecurity schema framework, which is called OCSF, what you do is that you kind of universally make all those respective logs from wherever they're originating up, whether it's from firewall, whether it's from your respective WAF, right, which is eventually also a firewall, which is any kind of firewall you can think about, whether it's your IDS, IPS, okay, your WAF, your security group, your VPC flow logs, any kind of logs from wherever it is originating up in place, it is kind of consolidating it up and kind of merging it up and making it universally in a similar format. So the logs that you will be getting it from the firewall and from the VPC flow log all will be of the same format, right? That's what it is. Okay, because otherwise the format of the logs, you're getting it from the firewalls, different firewalls, different VPC flow logs, CloudTrail, CloudWatch are completely different, and it becomes very difficult to merge them up in place. So open source, open cybersecurity schema framework, OCSF, makes it universal, that all the logs that will be going to this respective bucket will be having this respective format. So whatever, from wherever the logs are coming in, they all will be having the same format up in place. So it's kind of a universal format, right? That's the thing. So it becomes very easy to understand a particular log from wherever it is coming up, right? That's what it is up in place. Okay, so that's, they have added up, this is the new thing they have added up in place, right? So it means that now any log that is coming, so this is actually used up in the SOC environment, because in the SOC you have so many instruments up in place, EDR, XDR, correct, and they all continuously sending up the logs up as well. Okay, so now definitely they all have different format. So this OCSF make it compulsory that what is the structure of the logs is going to be from wherever it is originating up, and that becomes very easy for you as a user to read it out and find the threats and investigation to get it up in place. Okay, that's the thing. Another thing they have added up as well is that they have added up this respective OWASP top 10 LM application protections up in place. Okay, that kind of things. OWASP already has a very famous list, which is OWASP top 10 web application list, right? Vulnerabilities, which they also have recently launched up as well. But here, why we have OWASP top 10 for LM application up in place, right? Large language model, because the AI and the LLM, which is at the rise, right? Everyone, it's a hot topic. So OWASP, so you should be aware about how to integrate this respective OWASP top 10 LLM application protection up here by itself. Okay, great. Okay, because in this respective part, what they have done is that they are talking about ML models and how or what should you do in order to protect those respective ML models as well. In this security specialty, they are not talking about how do you create your ML models, right? They're talking about how you can protect those ML models up in place, right? What are the best methodologies you should be using it up? What kind of services you should be using it up to protect those respective ML models? Because we know that from security point of view, those ML models can be also compromised up in place. Okay, that's the thing. Okay. Then you have to design and configure for this ECS, okay, and EMR, right? So like it's now talking about that you should be also able to deploy up your respective Docker and the Kubernetes up in place into the AWS part, and also you have to protect them up as well. And there's a wonderful service, AI service, which is called SageMaker. SageMaker is a kind of a service, guys. We are having it up into the respective AWS, and that respective service, the SageMaker, what it really does is that it helps you in kind of training your respective own AI model. Okay, that's the thing, correct? So this is the thing, right? And yeah, and describe it if, and how you can create your respective own key material. This is also kind of thing having it up, and mask your respective data like CloudWatch log protection policies, right? So how you can mask your respective data up in place, and yeah, again about the KMS part as well, right? Create and manage encryption key and certificate across single AWS region or multiple region up in place, that kind of things. Okay, so how you can replicate your respective keys eventually, so that if your one key gets lost, how you can still would be able to perform the decryption. So this is a thing that is they have added up in place. Okay, not so I would say different. The KMS part was already there up in place. Okay, they just separately mentioned up in place, but already in my session, I already teach this respective thing, the replication part. It's already there in the setting part. You just need to click one, just or two options, and you're good to go, right? And the sensitive part is already there as well. The new part I would say is that is this particular thing of integration of this uh, Kubernetes and the Docker part. Okay, the LLM models, how do you protecting up the LLM models into the AWS, and this OCSF as well. Okay, which is kind of making it universally that all the logs from wherever they are originating it up, like your uh, any kind of firewalls, external or internal firewalls up in place, all would be having the same format up in place. So that's going to be very interesting. Okay. So guys, this is what we knew. We have not much, just only 4 or 5 things new into our respective this AWS security specialty C03, right? So any doubt, any question, guys, still here? Anyone? So they have added up this respective, I would say, your Docker Kubernetes up, right? Your LM model and your OCSF in this respective part. Okay, that's the new. Fine. Let's keep it aside. And now let's move to practicing certain questions. Fine. Okay. And these questions I have selected up, right, from my respective experience as well as my respective experience of my students, which has passed successfully the examination, the older one, right? Okay. Now, okay. So in this respective one, what's actually a thing is there, right? Okay. Let's see that. The question. The question says that an application run on Amazon EC2 instance in a VPC. So EC2 instance means a server. We call, if someone is not aware about EC2 instance means, uh, instance means a server. So EC2 is a service inside which we create the server. Fine. So there is an application running it up. Just a minute, guys. Let me just grab my pen. Okay, fine. Yeah. So now here by itself is that we have a respective. This is my instance, correct? My server, and inside it, guys, is my respective application. This is my app. Fine. Okay. Now what actually happens up is that that is present inside a VPC. VPC, the concept is kind of an isolated place we're having up into the AWS. Now thing is that here is that the application process logs that are stored up into the S3 bucket. So there is an S3 bucket we have. S3 bucket is something, yeah, S3 bucket. So S3 bucket is something, we can say is where we putting up your respective data up in place. Okay, that's what we have. So that's the thing. So you are sending up the logs from your application to this S3. S3 you can imagine like Google Drive. So you can write it down somewhere down the line. S3, guys, is your respective Google Drive. Okay, where you can store your respective data, you can perform the encryption and all this kind of stuff. You can do it up in place. Okay, perfect. Now, the EC2 instance means server need to access that particular bucket without connecting to the internet. Means that logs, these applications logs are getting sent to the S3 without going through the internet. Okay, how it's possible? So you need to provide a private network for that. So how it's possible? So first option is to use the VPC endpoint, and that is absolutely true. Always keep in mind that what we have is that in this respective cases, we have something which is called the VPC endpoint. And in the respective VPC endpoint, okay, uh, it allows your respective traffic to go through or inside the AWS infrastructure. So in this, when you're using up the VPC endpoint, your traffic is not going to the internet service provider, right? Through the AWS cables up in place, and it is connected up. That's what we have. Okay. So this is what we have in this respective part. Okay, fine. So this is the thing we have here in place. So VPC endpoint, definitely for sure, you will be having it up in this case. Okay, great. For private communication, always keep in mind, means that this traffic never leaves the AWS infrastructure. So if I just draw it up, that this is the AWS infrastructure, fine. So here, right, this respective outer one is your respective, no, this is not good. Okay, yeah. So this respective thing, you see that this outer one you're seeing it up here in place. This is, guys, is your respective AWS infrastructure. And in this case, the traffic never leaves the AWS infrastructure up in place. Okay, that's what we have. So this is the thing we have here in place. Okay, in the VPC endpoint. That is the reason it's used up in your respective organization, the VPC endpoint. Perfect. Okay, fine. Okay. Then we have streams of log dot CloudWatch up in place. So I would say that CloudWatch is a different service. CloudWatch is a resource monitoring service. What it means, resource monitoring service means that it is like a task manager telling up that whether your respective resources are working perfectly fine or not. So this is not going to be the respective option. This is the one. Okay. And instance profile, no, that's a different option. And API gateway, that's not the case. So always keep in mind, just keep it down, right? You can write it somewhere down the line that if you have the communication, okay, Happening privately means the traffic is not going to your internet service provider and then going to the service. That's not happening it up. It's happening internally inside the AWS. For that, we have something which is called the endpoint. So this, if this outer layer is your respective AWS, okay, your traffic never leaves the AWS infrastructure. Correct? That's the thing. And for that, we have service which is called endpoint. Now, guys, this is the second question. Everyone, please go through it. Now, guys, in this case, what we have is that let's see the question. The question says that a company is recently migrating to the AWS, okay, and it wants to implement a solution to protect the traffic flow in and out of the VPC. So you have a VPC where I just told to you, right? You know, this is a VPC, virtual private cloud. It's an isolated system, correct? Where inside it you deploy your respective servers and all kind of stuff. Okay, you do inside the VPC. Fine. So now what you need to do is that you need to control the traffic flow. So you protect the traffic flow up in place that is coming to the VPC and going out. So how do you achieve that? That respective thing, that respective, traffic coming in and traffic going out. Fine. Okay. So in happen. So company already have an inspection server in the on-prem which perform the specific kind of operations like controlling the traffic flow of inspecting the traffic that is coming in and going out at the VPC level. So what same functionality they have want into the AWS part. So can they do that? Yes, they can. So again, the question is that this is my particular VPC and the traffic that is coming in and the traffic that is going out. Okay, I want to monitor that, right? And if that respective traffic is not fulfilling my respective requirement in that respective regards, the traffic will not be allowed. Correct? Like means a firewall. I want a firewall at the VPC level. Okay. So here is that which solution meet the requirement. First is use Amazon Guard Duty, right? Amazon Guard Duty, guys. So are you aware about what this Amazon Guard Duty is all about? So what I say is that in a layman's language, guard duty is like an antivirus. You can think it up in your respective AWS environment. So any kind of a threats you are having it up, your instance is there which is compromised, okay, which is converted into a bot. You have a particular service that is into the S3 that has been compromised. Fine. So if you have those kind of things, you want to looking into it up in place, you have something which is called by the name of a guard duty for the threat part, right? Okay. So here it is up in place, right? Okay. So use Amazon Guard Duty or traffic inspection up in place. Nope. Traffic Guard Duty will not be helping you out on up in place, right? Guard Duty is not for traffic inspection. Okay. Traffic mirroring? No. Traffic mirroring, you this thing, this traffic mirroring or mirroring of the traffic, this feature is used up when you want to perform deep packet inspection. The question does not talks about that. We are not looking into each and every packet and looking into what is inside it. Nope. We just want to just scrutinize the traffic that is coming to the VPC and going out. Simple as it is. Okay, fine. Now there is something which is called network firewall. So guys, keep in mind this AWS network firewall that you're seeing it up. This is a type of firewall you have into the AWS. AWS network firewall, correct? And this sets up at the VPC level. So what will happen up? So if let's suppose, for example, I just take up my respective, I would like to erase all of it and say that if this is my particular VPC, okay, where my resources are deployed inside it, now the respective firewall, which is my network firewall, NF, would be sitting out of it, right? Now, any traffic which is wants to come, whether it's a genuine traffic, whether it's malicious traffic, first would be hitting up the respective network firewall, and if it is valid, then only it will be entering up the respective VPC and then going to the respective server up in place. Okay, so network traffic firewall sounds good. Firewall manager is a kind of a centralized place through which you will be managing multiple firewalls up in place. Okay, that's the thing. So it's not actually a firewall; it's the place, it's a centralized place through which you manage or control multiple firewalls, right? So this is not the one. So the correct answer, guys, is the C, right? So you can note it down as well that network firewall is a kind of firewall which protects your entire VPC. And if you look into the answer, yes, C is the correct. Okay, correct. Okay, good. Now, and keep in mind, this firewall manager is like a centralized one, correct? Through which what's going to happen? You are going to manage plenty of firewalls up in place. Okay, so it's a centralized kind of thing, right? It's not actually a firewall. It in itself does not protect you anything. If you have, let's suppose, 100 of firewalls, right, and you want to manage all the 100 of the firewalls, correct? So how would you do that? You do it through using up the respective AWS firewall manager up in place. Okay, fine. Okay. Now, guys, let's move to the third question. This is the third question, guys. Everyone, please go through it. Okay. This question, guys, is most about from the monitoring point of view as well. Fine. Okay, so let's see that. And it's very, very important question. So here's the question: says a company hosts a multi-day application on the AWS. Okay. The company compliance, governance, and security, right? The company must track configuration changes. Means configuration changes means someone has changes the configuration. Okay. They should track it up on the AWS resources and record an history of API calls. API calls means an actions you're performing it up. Correct? That's the thing. So whenever you see this respective thing, API calls. So now what the company need is that two things. Any changes that has been making to the respective things, that's called configuration changes, and any API calls, okay, to create an instance, that kind of things. So what kind of, right, what should the solution architect meet the respective requirement? So CloudTrail to track the configuration changes? No. Configuration changes are not tracked by the CloudTrail, right? Okay. And AWS config to, okay, nope. I would say it's kind of an opposite. So A is not definitely not the one. AWS config to track configuration changes? Yes. AWS config is used to track the configuration changes. Let's suppose, for example, I have a firewall. Today I create a firewall on 20th of December, right? And today I create up a rule inside that particular firewall to allow the RDP. Let's suppose on 1st of Jan, I just go ahead and change that particular rule, correct? So that is a configuration change, okay, that Amit has changed or edited that particular firewall. The firewall remains as it is, right? But the firewall rule has changed up in place. Okay, so that, if you want to track it up, that configuration changes that are taking place with for any of your respective resources, you have which is called AWS config. Fine. Okay. And CloudTrail to record any kind of an API activity. Fine. So do you want to record up an API activity up in place? Yes, CloudTrail will be there to track up an API activity. Yes, API activity means any action you're performing it up, correct? Like creating up a respective resource, deleting it, that's an API action. So CloudTrails maintain that. Means CloudTrail mention your respective logs, any action that you're performing it up into the AWS. CloudTrails maintains a record of that. Okay, perfect. Then we have, so B looks good till now, right? Okay, but let's explore the other options, because keep in mind, guys, this you should be having this particular practice that you should always explore the other options as well. Okay, so let's see that. Let's explore the other options. Here it says that use AWS config to track configuration changes. Correct? To config to track configuration changes, good. And Amazon CloudWatch to record the API calls? No. CloudWatch is for resource monitoring, right? It tells you how well your CPU is performing, how well your RAM is performing. Fine. Then it says use Amazon CloudTrail to track configuration changes. Nope. Right? And CloudWatch to API calls? No. So only option we are left with is B. Fine. So it's my humble request, guys, that whenever you go for the respective examination, always, right, go for all the options. Even if you get to know that okay, B is the correct one, but still always go with the other options as well. Because in the examination, let's suppose D is also correct, but D is much better than the B. So definitely for sure B is the one you have to selecting up in place, right? Because in the AWS does not say about selecting the correct answer. It talks about selecting the most appropriate answer, and you can only select the most appropriate answer if you have gone through all the options. Okay, so B, guys, is the correct option. So if any changes that you want to notice or track that has taken place with the respective resources, correct, you go with the AWS config and CloudTrail for any kind of an action you're performing it up. Any kind of resources that you're creating, deleting it up in place, that falls under the respective CloudTrail. Fine. Okay. Now, guys, let's move to the next question. This is the next question, everyone. Please go through it. Okay. So it says that a company has an application that run all the EC2 instance in a VPC. Fine. Okay. One of the application needs to call an S3 API to store the read up in place. So again, the same thing that you have an instance. This is your respective server, which is holding up an application, correct? And that wants to communicate with the respective S3, which is like a storage you're having it up into the AWS. Okay. According to the company security regulation, no traffic allowed to travel over the internet, as I just mentioned to you. So, guys, what do you think? If you want that the traffic from one service or one resource to go to another one without going through the internet, without going through the internet service provider, what is the option we are having it up? What do you say? I just told you right today by itself we talked about the first question. What is the thing you're going to use it up? It's the endpoint. Okay, right? Fine. So your server is there, wants to communicate to the S3, which is like a Google Drive, and want to send the data to it up in place. Correct? So keep in mind that this is the AWS infrastructure. Both of them are present inside the AWS infrastructure. Fine, right? So the traffic from the server would be going directly to the S3 without leaving the AWS infrastructure. So if there is a hacker would not be able to perform man in the middle attack up in place. Okay, so definitely for sure the gateway endpoint is the correct answer. You're having it up. But as I mentioned to you, it's a best practice to explore all the other options, like create an S3 bucket in the private subnet. No, you cannot do that. You cannot create up a particular bucket in a public or private subnet, right? Okay. Create a S3 bucket in the same AWS region as the EC2 instance. Again, this will be good, but again, this communication will be going through the internet. So endpoint is still the best option. Configure the NAT gateway in the same region. Again, NAT gateway has a problem that it only allow outgoing of the traffic, incoming it prohibits up in place. Okay, so the best option is that to create up an endpoint, and what will happen up? So this is the endpoint. Okay, this is this EP endpoint we call it, and this endpoint allow my respective server to communicate to the respective S3 without this traffic, this error you seeing it up, this traffic without going outside of the AWS infrastructure. Okay, so there is no internet service provider in between. There is no one in between, right? It's directly tra- or this communication or the traffic flow happening inside the AWS, right? That's what we have in this case. Okay, perfect. So, guys, in this respective part, the correct answer is going to be the first one, right? Good. So, this is the one we have here. Okay. Now, guys, let's explore the other options, other questions. This is, guys, the next question. Everyone, this question. The question says that, yeah, the question says that a solution architect might design a high available infrastructure for respective website. Okay. The website is powered by Windows Web Server that run on Amazon EC2 instance, right? So you have your respective EC2 instance, and that is Windows Run. Fine. Okay. The solution architects need to implement a solution that mitigate large scale DOS, DDoS attack that originate from thousands of the IPs. Downtime is not acceptable for the website up in place. So you want to, you know, uh, you need to handle the respective DDoS attack. So which action should the solution architect take to protect this respective solution website from the attack up and place, right? So you select up and place. So first thing, guys, I want to ask you this respective question here is that what is actually a DDoS attack? What do you think, guys? What happens up in your respective DDoS attack? Distributed denial of service attack. Distributed denial of service attack. In this, a huge number of traffic is sent to your respective location, right? So much so that your system becomes overwhelmed. Fine. That's what we have into it. The DDoS attack part. Okay. So which action should the solution architect protect options up in place? And you have to choose two options up in place. Fine. Okay. So first is that AWS Shield. Yes, definitely for sure. AWS Shield, keep in mind, is that respective service we have into the AWS, right? Which is there to protect us from the DDoS attack. It's a service specifically there up in place. Exactly, Naveen. Correct. Exactly. That's what we have in DDoS attack. Okay, so the mitigation could be AWS Shield up in place. One mechanism that because it's a service we have into the AWS to handle the um, this DDoS attack. Okay, perfect. Okay, but we have to choose the another option as well because it says choose to. Then it says select your respective guard duty up in place. Guard duty is like threat detection, but it's not there to protect you from a DDoS attack. Nope. It is there to find the threats. It's there to find the malware or compromised system in your respective AWS. Okay. Then it says configure the website to use Amazon CloudFront for both static and dynamic content. Yes, I would say. Because when you're using up this Amazon CloudFront, yes, exactly, Naveen, correct. So CloudFront is the CDN. And what actually happens up here is that you create something which is called by the name of an edge location. Okay, when it comes to the respective CDN. Now the interesting part here is that in their respective CDN is that when there is an edge location, right? So CloudFront is a CDN and you create an edge location there. So whenever there is an edge location, when you make a traffic, the traffic hits your nearest edge location, correct? So that makes it very much simpler, right? And it's really a good strategy to handle the DDoS attack. How come? Let's suppose, for example, this is an edge location, okay, and this is a US person, right? Okay, and this is actual server. So the traffic is not going to go to the server up in place. It's going to go to the respective nearest edge location. Correct? Fine. This is what's going to happen up. So every time, let's suppose a group of hackers are there in the US, when they make up a DDoS attack, their traffic is going to go to this respective edge location up in place. In that particular case, the server remains intact. Fine. So this is how the CloudFront is protecting your respective this thing. So C is a good option. AWS Lambda to automatically, no, I would say that Lambda would not be there. This is not a good option. And EC2 Spot instance, this is not the good option as well. Okay, so we have two correct option here as well, which is using up the AWS Shield and to use up the respective CDN, the CloudFront, which creates up an edge location. And then the principle with the edge location, guys, is that right whenever you make, let's suppose I am the hacker, okay, and CDN is there, content delivery network is there, which creates an edge location, and there is a server setting it up in, let's suppose, in the Mumbai region. So it's not going to happen that whenever there would be a CDN, my traffic would be always going directly to the server. No. If there is a CDN, your traffic never goes, your client traffic never goes to the server directly. It goes directly to the nearest edge location. So near to my house, there is an edge location. My traffic would be going there up in place. Okay. So if I have a millions of requests, I'm a hacker, I'm sending up, performing a DDoS attack. So that millions of requests would be not going to the original server. It will be going to the respective nearest edge location up in place. Okay. In that process, my actual server setting it up in the Mumbai region will be well protected. Fine. So this is also one of the countermeasure to handle up your respective your DDoS up in place. Okay, AWS Shield and the CloudFront. What we have in this respective question. Okay, the question says that a company needs to retain application log file for a critical application for 10 years. So we need to retain the logs. For how long? For 10 years up in place. Okay. Now, the application team regularly access logs from the past month for troubleshooting up, but logs older than 1 month are rarely accessed. So if you have logs which is uh, I would say older than the 1 month, you access them very rarely. Fine. Okay, this is a respective situation we are having it up. Fine. The application generate more than 10 TB of logs per month. So which of the storage option meets the requirement most effectively? So once the logs are beyond 1 month, right? They're older than 1 month. They need to be retained for 10 years, and they are very much logs getting created up in place. 10 TB per month. That's a lot. So out of the following, what we have in place. So first is that store the logs in Amazon S3. Use backup to move the logs, right, more than 1 month up in place. So I will not be using up the backup. There's another feature we are having it. Store the logs in Amazon S3. Good, because S3 is unlimited, so you have no problem in storing up 10 TB or 100 TB of the logs. Use lifecycle policy to move the logs from 1 month to the Glacier Deep archive. Exactly. S3 Glacier Deep, this lifecycle policy will automatically move those respective logs which are less than 1 month old to automatically to the respective deep archive. Fine. So this looks promising. Fine. Then we have stored the logs in Amazon CloudWatch. Use backup to move the logs more than 1 month old to the Glacier Deep archive. No, this is not how it's work. Okay. So you can keep it up into the CloudWatch logs up in place, but then moving it up using a backup to the Glacier Deep archive, that's not going to happen up in place. And store the logs in Amazon CloudWatch log. Use S3 lifecycle policy to move it. No, use cannot use the S3 lifecycle policy up in place. So out of the following, the most appropriate AI sky answer is going to be your respective B. Fine. Where what you're doing is that you're storing up your respective logs in the respective S3. Fine. And then after the period of 1 month, because this is, you can define this thing into something which is called by the name of a life cycle policy. So literally in your respective life cycle policy, you define this thing that okay, these logs are created, but after 1 month, you move them automatically to the S3 Glacier Deep archive. And if someone is not aware about what is actually S3 Glacier Deep archive is, it is a storage class into the AWS S3 which is there too for long-term storage. So if you have a data which is important, but you're not accessing it every single day, so you use this service which is called S3 Glacier Deep Archive, right? And it drastically reduces your respective cost. Let's suppose you have a file of 100 GB and you access it once in a year. So you put up into the Glacier Deep archive, and trust me, the cost becomes drastically reduced. It's like $0.001 per month. So even if you combine the entire year, it's not even $1. Just imagine 10 GB of 100 GB of file, but the storage is not even $1. That's the power of deep archive. Okay, but the problem with the deep archive is that keep in mind the retrieval cost. Okay, and there's a time duration. The problem with the deep archive is one is the retrieval cost, and another one is that whenever you need your files, the file would not be immediately provided to you. There is a delay, at least of I would say sometime 5 minutes, sometime of 12 hours in place. Okay, that is kind of a disadvantage of the deep archive. Fine. So this is what we have here in place. Okay.